Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Elevate Life YouTube channel. I am your host, Jerla Prevalon. If you are new and you have not followed us, and this is your first time for visiting my YouTube channel, welcome. I'm so glad you are here and you have decided to join the conversation. On this show, we focus on women, the stories of women, their joys, their trauma, their pain and suffering. And we look at how they have triumphed over and over again with Jesus and therapy in mind as their guide throughout the healing journey. We are continuing with this series, you guys. If you have not been watching, I suggest to go back to the other episodes because we are talking about starting over again. Basically, after you've experienced loss, trauma, pain, and suffering, how do you start over again? How do you allow yourself to triumph, to get up and get back up again? And we have had guests who has blown us away. There's been some tears, there's been some laughter, there's been a little bit of everything in between. Today we have a very special guest. Yes, another special guest. But this one, y'all, she's my girl. She is my sister in love, Cherisna, Reverend Cherisna Jean Marie, and she will share with you guys. I just want you to get ready, get your notebooks, get yourselves together, get a blanket somewhere because she will just blow your mind. Okay, so stay tuned to hear her story, to hear how she has dealt with joy, with pain, with suffering, and how she has triumphed over all of that and what she is doing. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned.
Okay.
We're about to segue into part two. Okay.
Okay.
So, part two of this conversation for you, it sounds like you have accepted your season in life,
Mhm.
that this is where you are in life. As an unmarried woman, there's life. You are creating, you are doing great things, and you are an auntie of aunties. Okay. And you pride yourself on that. Now, the two of us share a season together, 2019, the holiday season of 2019. Now, for those of y'all listening, we may cry, and that's okay.
Mhm.
As we're talking about lament, that's okay. We may shed some tears. I don't talk publicly about 2019. I do some um, about 2019, partly because it was such a painful end of the
Yes.
year for both of our families. And so I want to create room in this part two of our conversation to talk about you as an auntie and what you experience. And you know what, you don't have to share what you don't want to share, what you haven't processed, or whatever. I hold the space because you and I share the story together. And so I'm gonna close the conversation if it's not where we need to go in the conversation. So I'll let the spirit lead us
Yeah.
into this conversation. So 2019, we shared two major losses together. Your nephew, my nephew, Christopher, and my brother, um, those two intersected in a way that I still haven't been able to fully process. And it was traumatic. And I think when trauma happens, you don't process it in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. I think it's something that for life, there's still questions about what in the world was that, God? And I still have that question. So I want to give you some space to really share about that time for you. And then I want to lead us into the work that you're doing now, in response to 2019 and the work that I'm doing now because of
Yeah.
2019 too, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me, the auntie of aunties, and
Yeah.
when one of your babies pass on.
Yeah. So I want to start before December. So
Yeah.
I got a new call May 2019 to move back to Nashville to become the director for racial justice ministries at a nonprofit organization. So this wasn't just a new call, new ministry. This was a transition as a whole for me because now I'm moving outside of the traditional church ministry
Mhm.
into a nonprofit era.
Mhm.
Very new for me. I did school, universities, colleges most of my life, did church most
Right.
of my vocational career, and now I'm entering into the nonprofit world.
Mhm.
So huge transition. And I didn't realize it
Yeah.
at the time how huge it was. So I started June 1st of 2019. And maybe, and I don't really know the exact dates, but maybe uh, June, July, I hear the voice of the Lord say to me, as clear as you and I are talking,
Mm.
I want you to start grief retreats for
Mm.
Black mothers who's lost children due to gun violence.
Mm.
It didn't make sense to me. I could not connect the work that I was doing at the nonprofit with this, but I heard it and I was like, okay. So I remember having a conversation with my staff. We had a meeting with the program staff and they jumped on it. Was like, okay, let's do it. So I go in my office. About 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in my office and I get a cold call. I get a
Mm.
cold call from a young lady called Clemmy Greenlee.
Mhm.
Clemmy Greenlee is someone I worked with in the past. I used to fundraise for her when I lived in Nashville. And she heard that I moved back. Someone actually told her that I moved back to Nashville and I was at Scarrett Bennett Center. And Clemmy tells me she Googled Scarrett Bennett Center and found a number. And it was simply a cold call. And it just happened to be my direct line to my office.
Mm.
I
Wow.
answered the phone and she's like, hey, I'm looking for Cherisna. She can't really pronounce my name. I said, this is Cherisna, Jean-Marie. She said, Cherisna, is that you? This is Clemmy Greenlee. Oh, Clemmy.
Mm.
And she says, Cherisna, I got these mothers who's lost their children due to gun violence, and I don't know what to do with them.
Mm.
And it was the first confirmation that this was what God was calling me to. I was like, oh my God, I
Mm.
just had a staff meeting. Da, 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 da. We want to do this. I had no clue when I told my staff we wanted to do this, where I would even find the women. It was such an odd request because I don't have children. I
Right.
don't live that world of gun violence. No, I don't know anyone who does. That's
Right.
how privileged I thought I was. And yet God called me into that. And we had our first grief retreat in October 2019. And Jola, I did that grief retreat and I can't tell you how I understood their pain, but I did. And it wasn't simple.
Yeah. I remembered
I
it.
knew the
Mhm.
pain. It
Mhm.
was too familiar. It was scary. It was
Mhm.
so familiar. The moms, the way they praised the retreat because it was just what they needed.
Yeah.
Somehow, this woman who never given birth, who only have
Mm.
nephews and niece, understood what a mother's pain would be
Mm.
and created a whole weekend for them.
Mhm.
That was October 2019.
Wow.
Then December came.
Mhm.
And Christopher was murdered December 9th, 2019. He was shot and killed. It was a horrible, violent death.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think what hurts more
Yeah.
is how he died.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And it always interrupts my joy when I
Mm-hmm.
think about, the details of how he died.
Yeah.
If he was at this funeral, there were so many people, a good 500 people at this funeral for this
Yeah.
boy, who many of them did not know, but that's what we do when we're in community. You
That's right.
show up when
That's right.
someone is in
Yeah.
need, and the Haitian community from all over
All
showed
over.
up on our behalf.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I always think he left this world physically with people who did not love him.
Mm.
And he was buried by hundreds of people who was surrounded by love.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that in grief, when you're looking at a family that has suffered a tragic loss like that, you can understand the mother's grief, the father's grief,
Yeah.
even the grandmother's grief, right? We seldom hear about the auntie's grief,
Mm. Yeah.
how the auntie grieves for their nephew or niece or
Uh-huh.
whatever the case may be,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
we do this grief gymnastic as to who grieves more
Yeah.
or who's allowed to grieve more, right?
Yeah.
And then you have an auntie who loves so deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me a little bit about the auntie's grief, the aunt's grief
Yeah.
when her baby passes tragically like that.
Like I said, I don't have children, but it feels very much like wound pains,
Of course.
right? Because it's not just it's my sister,
Mm-hmm.
right? To bear witness to her grief, there
Yeah.
is we shared a wound, right?
Yeah.
And so there's something there to bear witness to her in
Yeah.
that way. My mom, who I remember we were trying to figure out how to tell my mother,
Tell her. Yep. Mm-hmm.
because we just wasn't sure
If she
how
could take it.
that she
Mm-hmm.
would be able to take this.
Right.
Um, right. You worry about my niece
Mm-hmm.
who grieves in her own unique way, and you can't project that on her, but she very
Right.
much grieves. So you want to be able to negotiate with her
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
space to grieve,
Yeah.
because she just graduated college, so she's an adult in many
Right.
ways, but yet you still want to hold and protect, right?
Right. Right.
And then it's your own. The last conversation I had with Christopher, we were talking about the future. He called
Yeah.
me up to tell me that he decided to join the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a
Mm-hmm.
moment in the conversation, Dearla, where he paused because he was waiting to hear what I had to say.
Mm.
It's the kind of relationship that
Yeah.
I have with him, with all of my nieces and nephews, I believe, is
Right.
my voice matter in their lives. We don't talk every day, we don't see each other or whatever, but yet there's an imprint
Yeah.
where when they call you, and they pause because they want to hear your voice, because your
They want to
voice
hear.
matter
Yeah.
in their lives, right? Um, and so, the twins do that all the time. Well, Auntie
Mm-hmm.
Cherisna said,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yep.
and so because I know that with my niece and nephews, I'm always mindful of what I say or don't say,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or whatever the case is. So
Yeah.
it is it's the kind of pain that I don't think I'll ever heal from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
learn how to live
Well, it's not a
in grief.
healing, right? It's not a healing that needs to take place, but more of how do you manage it, process it, live with it, because it's not something you move from.
That's right. You live with that.
You live with it. So it's not a healing in the sense of a healing, because sometimes people look at the word healing like you leave it behind. This is not something you leave behind. This is something different where you live
It's
with,
what's
you know?
the art where you break the jar and you put it back together?
Exactly. Yes.
My heart is completely broken and it will never be the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And it
It's
shouldn't. It
will
shouldn't,
never
because
be the same. I will never
there's a loss. Yeah,
I will never
that's a
be whole.
big loss.
And I have every day. I speak his name every day. I have
Mhm.
moments every day. And I have moments of grief
Yeah.
almost every day. There are moments where it's someone, because he was such a character.
Mhm.
Um, and so there are times when I see someone who reminds me of him and I'll laugh.
Yeah.
But there are moments of grief frequent,
That's right.
right? It doesn't
That's right.
go away. Um,
Right.
he was young. He was only 20.
Yeah.
And Christopher was someone we did not expect. I often describe Cassie and Christopher, my eldest sister Weasley, and she knows I share this as part of it's actually a sermon that I preached about prayer. And you know this, being in New Jerusalem, for me, understanding the power of prayer was through her experience. I grew
Mhm.
up watching my sister and my brother-in-law having a lot of trouble with not getting pregnant, but holding pregnancy, or
Mhm.
through the whole terms, trying to, I don't know the language. I've never been
Mhm.
pregnant before, but she's had a lot of miscarriages,
Yeah.
and yet the church kept praying. The
Mm.
church
Mhm.
would not stop praying for her, even when the doctor said stop trying, figure something else out. The church kept praying for her.
Yeah.
We would go to Jen
Right.
on
Right.
Saturday mornings,
Yes. Yes.
prayer request on Sunday morning, Thursday. Like, the church
Yeah.
did not stop. I heard we send Id Moran, the Moran family, in the prayer list all the time praying.
All the
And
time.
so for me, I feel like Cassie was an answered prayer. God had to give them a child, because
Right.
the prayers uh,
Of the people.
of the
Prayers of the
people
people. Mhm.
lifted it up. The heavens had to open up. So I often say Cassie is the answered prayer. So we
Wow.
expected Cassie.
Yeah.
Christopher came out of no
That was
one
the
prepared
bonus.
for
That
Christopher.
was the bonus.
So I
Yeah.
often say Christopher was God showing off.
Yeah.
Right? When
Yeah.
the doctor said no and Cassie came and she was so small and frail, it was like, okay, we did it. God was like, we didn't just do it. Let me show you. Christopher
Mhm.
came and
Mhm.
it was
Mhm.
God showing off. And so um,
Yes.
I often remember Alzi when we were at the cemetery. Alzi's my brother-in-law. We were at the cemetery and Alzi saying, I didn't ask for him. Why would you give
Yeah.
me 20 years? Only 20 years. You
Wow.
didn't ask for him. And so that's the
Mm.
pain, right? Is
Yep. Yep.
he came and it was he was such a big surprise.
Yes.
We didn't
Yes.
expect
Yes.
him. And he was a big
Yeah.
surprise.
Yeah.
And for 20 years, he had such an impact on our lives.
Yeah.
I lived with them for for 18 months.
Yeah.
I lived with them when I moved to them. So I lived with Christopher when he was in eighth grade going into ninth grade. Maybe it was 2 years.
Mhm.
Eighth grade
Mhm.
going into ninth grade.
Yeah.
So the eighth grade
Yes.
stage, I was there
Yep.
for that, right?
Yeah,
The
that's
ninth
awesome.
grade stage, I was there for that. So we had a special bond.
Yeah.
Christopher would, when I would come visit, one of the first thing he would do is come in my room when I wasn't there and take all of my electronic stuff. Not that I had
Mhm.
anything fancy or anything, but I think it was just his way of sharing a kind of bond with me. He'll
Yeah.
just take my laptop, he'll take my iPad, he'll take my chargers. I'll come in my room and I'm like, it's all in his room.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was just,
That was the rites of passage. Rites of passage.
right. So,
I love it.
this Christopher, his absence is felt.
It's felt. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
Absolutely.
disappointed that we don't get to see him evolve into the man that we prayed for. We prayed for
Yeah.
our nephews and niece.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we don't get to see that we were robbed.
Yeah. Yeah.
His future, he finally decided he had purpose and he wanted to serve the
Mhm.
country, and we
Yeah.
were robbed of that. The day
Yeah.
he showed his mom the applications that he was about to
Wow.
change his life. He
Yeah.
made a decision
He
finally.
made a decision. Yep.
His
Yep.
life was
And then
robbed.
his life was taken.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that loss, you know, rippled through the whole community in such a way that leaves us with so many questions for God.
Mm.
Even, how you shared that Aldi, his father, just had conversations with God about why would you give him to us for just 20 years? Those are questions that we don't know what to do with.
Mhm.
Those are God questions, necessary questions, necessary conversations between the one that's grieving and their maker. And oftentimes, there are no answers that will
Satisfy or
appease and
soothe.
satisfy the griever.
That's right.
But that's part of the process.
That's right.
We got to let the process be the process, the
That's right.
grieving process. And oftentimes we try to kind of sweep these questions under the rug and say that they're unbiblical questions, but those are very much a part of the biblical process. I know we're running short on time. I want to ask you one more question about what you have done for the grieving, with the grieving. I know you started out with before he passed. What are you doing now
Yeah.
with your work post his passing?
Yeah. In terms of personal, I've done some grief therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but to be honest with you, these last few years has just been rough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because this doesn't happen, and so having
Yeah.
to evaluate faith in a way in the midst
Mm-hmm.
of grief, having to have to be able to ask those questions
Mm-hmm.
that don't have answers.
Yeah.
I often say, put God on the stand.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because how could this be?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
right? How could this be? Um, so last year, 2022, I decided that I wanted to revisit what God gave me in 2019 and
Mm-hmm.
use these questions that I have for myself and
Mm-hmm.
use my pain and my grief, my trauma around losing my nephew and turn it into purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Turn it into purpose. So I started a nonprofit called the Co-Conspirator Institute.
Yes.
It's a nonprofit organization that is committed to creating space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Creating space so people can reflect, so they
Yeah.
can ask the hard questions, and be allowed to ask the hard questions, to grieve,
Yeah.
be allowed to grieve and not grieve alone,
Yeah.
to heal, and to be transformed.
That's right.
Our goal is to build beloved community. And in
Yeah.
our work, we believe that the root of gun violence is um, white supremacy culture. And
Mm-hmm.
so we enter into this work twofold. We create space to address racial trauma. And one of the signature programs we do is called Mary's Weekend. It's a grief retreat for
Yeah.
Black mothers who's lost their children due to gun violence.
Mm-hmm.
It is
So
what
good.
I consistently pray about. It is the way God has anointed me to enter into space.
Yeah.
with women so that they can grieve.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the fancy way, right? So our grief retreats are very unique in
Mm-hmm.
that we allow women to grieve. We have one of our sessions, we call it the wailing room. And it's
Mm-hmm.
exactly that. It's for the moms to grieve however which they will. And we enter
Mm.
into grief with them.
That's good.
Black mothers don't always have the privilege to grieve, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's religion or responsibility. Oftentimes we
Right.
get so wrapped up in our religion, right?
Yep.
That I know, several people who are from the church, born and raised in the church, who do not have the capacity, their spiritual understanding of God, their theology does
Right.
not allow them to grieve. And so
Right.
they sit in silence and they hold it because they
Yeah.
don't think, or they think it's wrong to question God. They think it's wrong to cry out to God.
Right.
And so they hold it. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
there are other moms who have too much responsibility to grieve. They're afraid, if
Yeah.
I open up this grief,
Yep.
I'll get stuck there and I can't take care of the other children and the multiple jobs and other responsibilities that I have. So
Yeah.
we create this space.
Yeah.
And we call it Mary's Weekend because part of our work, Zola, we want to shift the narrative,
Mm-hmm.
our
Mm-hmm.
theologies. And so when you think
Yeah.
about Jesus at the
Mm-hmm.
cross, who was
Yes.
there? The
Yes.
disciples abandoned Jesus, right?
Yeah.
But his mother and
His
other
mother.
women were there. But his mother, dear life,
That's right.
was
That's right.
there
Mary.
at the cross. Mary, the
Mm-hmm.
mother of Jesus, was there,
Yeah.
did not abandon Jesus,
Yeah.
stuck there at the cross. I believe that she was so close that when his blood was shed, it splattered all over her because she
Mm.
was there. She was as close as she could be. And
She
for many
was.
of us, we've been told the story that Jesus died for our sins. He's our savior. And that's how we understand the cross. That's how we tell the story, the
Yes.
crucifixion story. That's how we see and read the story. But I
Yeah.
believe Mary did not go for the savior. Mary went because that was her
That was her baby.
that was her baby that they murdered.
That was her baby.
And where in the text do we see that Mary grieved?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where in the text did the writer think enough about
Mm.
Mary to tell us about her cry, to describe her cry at the cross? She
That's so
cried
good.
out. She
That's right. She
grieved.
did. She
Where? And
did.
so we have a whole theology.
That's so good.
We have
This
a
is
whole
so, so
theology
good.
that creates a movement of,
Yes.
of salvation, but doesn't make room for what it takes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For what it takes to
That is so
go.
good. That is
So
so
we call
good.
it Mary's Weekend because
Yes.
our work is about shifting the narrative to change culture, to
That's
change
right.
our theology. And so in our work, we make room for Mary's grief. And so the
That's
mothers
right.
enter into this space with Mary, the mother of Jesus.
That is so good. Oh my goodness. So when you told me that you were getting ready to start the nonprofit, remember what I said? It's about damn time. You know? Because this work is, I feel like this work, God has been birthing this work in you for such a long time. Again, now that you're doing it, yes, there's a personal touch to it because now you can identify in a way, that is very personal. But this is your work. This is your voice, your life, the way you care, the way you advocate, the way you are active, the way you show up for those that are in desperate need of the gospel, of God to show up for them. The way you show up, Cherisna, this is the work. This is the work. And I'm so, so proud of you. Like, so proud of you.
That that
Yeah.
you and so many others seen it way before I seen it. Till this
Yeah.
day, let me tell you, it is not something that I've chosen to do,
Yeah.
but it's definitely something I feel called to do. I feel led to do,
Yeah.
and don't I couldn't do anything else now that
Yeah.
I've chosen this. So
Yeah.
it is the work that my soul must have. And
Yes.
we continue to enter into the unknown in
That's
this
right.
work.
That's
But
right.
very much so. So our first retreat is this weekend. It's coming up.
Yes.
This weekend, we have 20 mothers, 20 women coming from 4 different states,
That's
all
awesome.
sharing the same plight that their child was lost due to gun violence. And we enter into
Wow.
the space, and we're very intentional about this space not being advocacy. We don't have these women do nothing but to
Yeah.
come and to grieve and to rest. And
To
because
just receive.
just to receive, and
Mm-hmm.
because grief is embodied, right?
Yeah.
We have a lot of self-care embodied practices that
Mm-hmm.
we also implement and we want to come and teach. But one of the most important things we also offer at our grief retreat, dear Lot, is life insurance. So we have someone who's coming to talk about life
Wow.
insurance, because unfortunately in the Black community, our children are dying way before their time.
Right.
Our
Right.
children are dying way before our time, and gone are the days of GoFundMe
Wow.
accounts,
Right.
because there are too many, right?
Too many.
Too
Too many.
many. And so we want to make sure that not life insurance is not about wishing that something
Yeah.
or even predicting something is
Yeah.
happening.
But
Life
it's
insurance is
practical.
about
It's a practical need.
preparation. That's right. It's a
Mm-hmm.
practical need.
Yeah.
And so we
Yeah.
want to make sure that our families are equipped um,
Yeah. That's
to
right.
live,
That's right.
to live a life that, I have some moms who have multiple children that they lost
Mm.
to gun violence.
Wow.
I had a mom
Jesus.
at my retreat in 2019. All 4 of her boys were murdered due
Jesus.
to gun violence. And these are the
Jesus.
stories, Jilla, that doesn't make the news, but these are
Mm-hmm.
also the stories that don't make the church house,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Clemmy Greenlee, who I shared, she said to me when I talked to her that churches don't open the doors to her and the moms because the way they grieve, right? So
Mm.
some of the moms might come and they're screaming and yelling and even cussing.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
church folks would say, we don't do this in here. We don't do
Wow.
that in here.
Wow.
We create space for the moms to simply be.
Just
Whatever
be.
it
Just
takes
show
for
up.
them,
No
whatever it takes
shame,
for them.
no guilt, no nothing. Just show up and
And you don't
grieve.
grieve alone. We enter into grief.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. How can people support you? Where can they go? Where can they find you? Where can they find your work?
Yes, the Co-Conspirator Institute. We are on Facebook. Um,
Yes.
so you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Instagram, but you can also go to co-conspiratorinstitute.org, co-conspiratorinstitute.org. Do you want me to leave?
I will put it in the link. I'll put the link in the comments
Okay.
so people can easily find you. The other thing is y'all
Where-
know about nonprofits, and y'all know that ministry is free, but nonprofit
That's right.
running a nonprofit ain't. So
I put
please
it in the
give to
chat.
this work.
I
Okay,
put it in
good.
yeah, it's not.
So
So
please
really would
give.
appreciate, yeah, if you are so
Mm-hmm.
moved by, want to learn more about our work, invite you to go to the website to learn more about our work. We do a lot of different programs for Black families, but at the heart of who we are and what we do, we offer grief retreats for Black mothers. We got the report that gun violence is the number one area or the number one issue that is killing Black children in this country.
Wow.
The
Wow.
leading cause of death of children in America is gun violence, and
Wow.
disproportionately it impacts Black families.
Right.
So if you're
Right.
watching this, if it's not you, it's someone you know.
It's someone you know.
Someone you
It's
know.
someone you know.
So I would really
Thank
love
you so
appreciate
much.
your
Thank
support.
you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Zara, for this space opportunity.
Yeah,
Opportunity I
no.
get to come and share with you. I'm down.
I know. This is so good. I mean, we're doing our professional work and
I
we're
know,
like,
all
look at
right.
us tag teaming, partnering, and all of that. And I love that as Black women, we are able to do that for one another and show up for each other and just say, I got you. You know, just call me, just say when. I got you. For
Yeah.
those of you that are listening, I hope you receive something in both of the parts. So I will release this interview in two parts. Because Reverend Cherisna had so much to share with us that I believe there's something in this conversation for everyone. So if you're watching, please share about her work. Please share the link to this YouTube show and subscribe and give big to Reverend Cherisna's work so that we can continue to help women, Black women, heal
Yes.
from this disease, from this thing that's happening in our society. So thank you all so much for watching. Please stay tuned for more. Invite people to like and subscribe and spread the word. Thank you all so for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.